Welcome to the Art Scene. I'm your host, Lila Snow. I'm going to start with an installation of particle painting, as in elementary particle, and scienza, my work, which will be at the new Physical Sciences Complex at the University of Maryland. It's a permanent installation. The building is closed on weekends. And the Scienza piece was collaged posters from the streets of Bologna in 1986, when Maryland's contribution to a big collaboration at CERN in Geneva was preparing a Ritchie chambers, which took the data from the accelerator to where the data was collected. And the streets of Bologna are full of posters. There are many students and many political events. So it's been a very active political scene since World War II. So I found a poster that had the word science, scienza, science in Italian, and that will be there along with the particle painting. So on to another exhibition. Along with the two artworks will be a plaque about the late Professor George H. Snow, who was the first director of the High-Energy Physics Group at Maryland, and about my history as an artist and performances at art and physics events. Also, we co-taught the first Women's Studies course in 1972. So on to another exhibition, Group 93, a group of artists who taught at American University, got MFA, got a bachelor's degree, or just took a few courses in the open program, decided in 1993 that they missed getting together to talk about art. So the group gets together. It's led by Professor Emeritus Luciano Pinay from Chile, and he's great at stimulating lively discussion. So the show is always in the rotunda of the Katzen Center. It will start at the end of September and run through most of October. On to a film, Infinitely Polar Bear. The polar comes from the fact that the father in this family is bipolar. So it's a biracial couple. He comes from a wealthy Boston family. His mother has a Bentley and offers to lend it to them, but they can't afford the gas. The wife comes from a poor black family. They have two amazing girls. So the grandmother is asked to please send the girls to private school because they live in a poor neighborhood with a terrible school. And she responds by saying, what message would that send? What message indeed, that she cares about the grandchildren and wants them to go to a good school. So this is interesting because it's a combination of mental illness, poverty, wealth, race. It's an interesting film, and it's very well performed by Mark Ruffalo and Zoe Saldana. On to Four Little Girls. On September 15th, 1963, there was a bombing of the 16th Street Church in Birmingham, Alabama. It took the lives of 4 little girls, and 16 years later, Spike Lee made a full-length documentary about it. This film will tear your heart out. It interviews the family, Martin Luther King, other powerful people. The purpose was to stop the civil rights movement. It didn't achieve that, and they prosecuted one man to start with. It was a local jury, and they wanted to start with the strongest case, and they did get a conviction for that. for little girls. There's a film, Woman in Gold, with Helen Mirren, and there's a book, Lady in Gold, by Anne-Marie O'Connor. They're both about this marvelous painting by Gustav Klimt called Portrait of Alma Bauer Bloch. Helen Mirren plays the niece of the woman in the portrait. She flees from Vienna in her early 20s in the war, and she's trying to get back 4 paintings. The Viennese government has put this painting of the portrait of her aunt in the Belvedere galleries. It's the gem of the collection, like Degas' boating party in the Phillips collection. She offers to sell it to them, but they say, no, they own it. And so a lawyer dedicates himself for years to go through the courts. It finally ends up in the Supreme Court. The niece lives in New York City. And so the lawyers for Austria have to come to appear before the Supreme Court. And they're going to show her that this is not such a big deal for them going to the Supreme Court, because they also want to go to Disneyland. And so Helen Mirren delivers zingers as only she can when they lose the case in the Supreme Court. And she says to them, enjoy Disneyland. And then they try to buy it from her. The painting is worth $83 million. And she says, no, I think that my aunt will make the journey to New York, just as I was forced to do in my early 20s. And so it's bought by Estee Lauder's son, who has a marvelous collection at the Neue Gallery on Fifth Avenue, and that's where it can be seen. So the film really just does the legal case. The book, Lady in Gold, gets into much more depth about their lives. The aunt and uncle and the mother and father live with the 2 daughters in the same apartment. So they're very close. The daughters sort of have 2 sets of parents. The family collects paintings, Stradivarius instruments. They live in a palace. They're very wealthy, and they go to the opera. This is a center of culture. There's Schoenberg's music. There's Freud, and Mark Twain visits and writes about it. They think of, these aristocratic Jews think of themselves as Viennese. They celebrate Easter, they celebrate Christmas, and all their belongings are taken away, and they all die except for the niece who miraculously flees. And so the book really gives you insight to that period. And also calling it Woman in Gold, it's like it's not this family's portrait. It's just a generic woman in gold. That's a great film. On to Murakami. I'm a big fan of a Japanese author, Haruki Murakami. In his introduction to Listen to the Wind, he talks about how he started as an author. He was born in Kyoto in 1949, so this is post-war Japan and very bleak. And he wrote a story in Japanese, and he thought it was very stiff and boring. So he hauled out a typewriter and wrote it in his limited English, and decided that added tension and it was much more interesting. He cites in the introduction that there's a Hungarian writer, the author of The Notebook, who fled to Neuchâtel and just started writing in her limited French. And also, I read that Jhumpa Lahiri, an Indian author of The Lowlands, very successful author, decided to totally immerse herself in Italian. So I think it's very interesting that 3 authors decide to do something that's not usually done, not write in the maternal language and then have it translated, but to write in a foreign language. It's sort of, in art, there's a tension. When Picasso first started doing collage, he tore off the end of a word, sort of like the unknown adds something to both painting and literature. I want to get to Orange is the New Black, because I binge watched a whole season, and there was one episode that I found really interesting. There's a character called Red. She's a Russian woman in charge of the kitchen, and she takes pride in her food. She makes fresh food. Well, the prison is taken over by private ownership, and so they're going to cut costs because they want to make a profit. First, they take away from the library the books that the inmates need about legal issues to help deal with their cases, and they take away the books about getting jobs after they get out. Then they take away the fresh food and just at some central place make some kind of mush that's sent to all the different prisons. And so the inmates discover that the kosher food is better, and 70 of the inmates decide that they, of the 200, decide they need kosher food. And they're screened by a rabbi and talk about their bat mitzvahs. It's very, very amusing. The Red keeps saying, I am not responsible for this food. So I'll see you next time on the art scene. This is Lila Snow.